are afraid of losing something. The relationship, the health, the version of your life that is working right now, the person you love, the career you built, the feeling you have right now, that you are terrified of not having tomorrow. A Greek philosopher named Heraclitus, born around 535 BC in Ephesus, said something that should stop you completely. You have already lost it. Not in the future, not when the bad thing happens. Already. Because, Heraclitus argued, the thing you are afraid of losing does not exist in the form you think it does. The relationship you have today is not the relationship you will have tomorrow. Different conversations, different feelings. Both people change by everything that has happened since yesterday. The person you love is not the same person they were 5 years ago. You know this. You can feel it. And they are not the same person they will be 5 years from now. You yourself are not the same person who started reading this sentence. Heraclitus wrote, in fragments that survive only because later philosophers quoted him, you cannot step into the same river twice. The river has different water. You have different atoms. What you called the river, what you call yourself, are processes, not objects. And processes, by their nature, are never the same twice. Here is why this matters, and why Heraclitus is not just making a philosophical point, but making a claim about the source of most human suffering. You suffer, he would say, because you treat things that are processes as if they were permanent objects. You hold on to them. You try to keep them fixed. You resist the change that is already happening, the change that is, according to Heraclitus, not an unfortunate feature of reality, but the deepest structure of reality. Change is not what happens to things. Change is what things are. Let me explain his philosophy fully, because it is more precise and more radical than it first appears. Heraclitus believed in what he called the logos. Not logos as in a company symbol, logos as the Greek word for reason, order, the underlying principle that governs the world. His claim, which was completely original in the history of thought, was that the logos is not a principle of stability. It is a principle of ordered change. The universe is not static and permanent with occasional disruptions called change. The universe is change, perpetual, constant, governed by a rational order that produces this change reliably and intelligibly. He used fire as his central metaphor. Fire is never the same from one moment to the next. It consumes and transforms everything it touches. It exists only in the process of becoming, only in the burning. For Heraclitus, everything in the universe is fire, not literally, but structurally. Everything exists in the mode of burning, in the mode of constant transformation, in the mode of never arriving at a final stable state. And his second great claim, the unity of opposites, follows from this. Opposites, in Heraclitus's philosophy, are not enemies. They are partners. Day requires night. Summer requires winter. Life requires death. Health requires illness. Tension requires release. The bow is useful, he said, because of the opposition between the string and the frame. Remove the tension, and you have not a better bow. You have no bow at all. The music of a lyre exists in the tension between the string and the frame. Harmony, Heraclitus said, is not the absence of opposition. It is the productive tension of opposition. Now stop, because here is where this becomes personal and uncomfortable. Think about the last time something in your life changed against your will. A relationship that ended, a career that shifted, a version of yourself that became unavailable to you as you grew older. And think about how much of your suffering in that moment was not about the loss itself, but about the gap between what was and what you believed should have stayed. Heraclitus is not saying you should not care about what you lose. He is saying the very structure of caring assumes a permanence that was never there. You loved the river. The river was always flowing. The question, Heraclitus implies, is not how to stop the flow, but how to love it while it flows. Here is the most challenging thing he says. Most people, he wrote, fail to understand the logos, even though it governs everything they encounter. They wake up every day inside a universe that is change, and they spend their day resisting change, trying to hold fixed what was never fixed, surprised when things become different, and then surprised again when the next thing becomes different, in an endless loop of surprise and resistance that they call experience. But, he says, it is all right there, available. The logos, the fact of universal flux, is the most obvious thing about the world. We simply do not want to see it, because seeing it requires accepting something that the ego, the sense of fixed self, the idea that you are a stable object moving through a world of other stable objects, cannot comfortably contain. You, too, are the river. Not a person crossing the river. Not a person watching the river. The river flowing. Heraclitus almost certainly came from a noble family in Ephesus, one of the greatest cities of the ancient world, and apparently renounced whatever hereditary privileges came with that origin. He was known for his contempt for the crowd, his distrust of conventional opinion, and his oracular, deliberately difficult style of writing. He wrote a single book, which he deposited in the temple of Artemis in Ephesus, rather than circulate it publicly. He is reported to have said that he wrote it that way, so only the capable could understand it. He was called the Dark Philosopher and the Weeping Philosopher, because he seemed to mourn the inability of most people to see what was directly in front of them. Only about 100 fragments of his work survive, preserved because later philosophers quoted him, and those fragments are among the most dense and provocative sentences in the history of thought. He died around 475 BC. The ancient accounts of his death are unreliable and probably invented by people trying to illustrate his philosophy. What he leaves behind is a question that is easier to state than to answer. The thing you are holding on to, the thing you are afraid of losing, has it already changed? Has it been changing continuously since the moment you decided it was the thing you needed to keep? And if so, what would it mean to love it, not despite the fact that it flows, but because it does? The river is beautiful precisely because it moves. Stand in it for long enough, and you might understand that you move too. This is Philochemy. We will see you in the next one.